Now we're in the live room. Great.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Phil. Great to see you here. We're starting early so people can come into the room. I'm just
Brilliant.
going to leave that screensaver there and we turn our cameras and mics off and I will come back to you here in a few minutes. Okay,
Super.
great.
Thank you.
See you in a few. Bye.
Bye.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Bridie and Roisin and Paul. Just letting you know I can see you all in there, and Phil, I know you're there as well. We're just in our holding pattern, I suppose, until 11 a.m. and we will start promptly there. We have a number of people in the room already,
Okay.
and I have posted into the chat there. So if we want to start up a little conversation with anybody, or you can feel free to turn your cameras on and have a chat in the meantime. How are you this morning, Bridie?
Good. Sorka, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, yes.
Very good. So I'm currently live in the room, is that correct?
We are all live in the room, yes.
Super. Excellent. All right. Well, good morning to those of you who have arrived. I'm Bridie Corrigan Matthews from Taste for Success SkillNet.
Bridie, we are not starting just yet. We're going to wait until 11 o'clock.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll just do sound check. Roisin, can you hear me okay? I know Roisin is there. I saw her camera on. I think she's on a phone call. Paul, just wondering if you can hear me okay at the moment.
Yeah, Sorka, I can hear you.
Fantastic. Great stuff. And great stuff I see there on camera as well, Paul. And Eamon, good morning to you. I see you've joined. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Fantastic. And we can see you perfectly as well. Super. I know Roisin is on a call there. I saw her when she turned her camera on. And Phil is there. Great. So I think we're all good for sound and video.
Great.
And there's Paul and Eamon and Roisin. Who are we waiting on to join, Phil?
I think Richie, is Richie there now?
We have 6 people in the room. So is somebody will be joining us after Bridie leaves us just after 11 o'clock.
Yeah, I won't be hanging around for too long, so I'll make sure there's plenty of capability on the platform, all right?
Fantastic.
Okay, folks, so we have a better day than we had. We have better weather than we had. It was wild here last Thursday, just as we went live on our first webinar. So, but great feedback. We've had fantastic feedback from those that were in attendance, and a number of the topics discussed were found to be extremely helpful. And I actually had 3 people ring me to say it was hugely beneficial, and they'll be tuning in absolutely and spreading the word. So some really good feedback on that to fill in the panel.
Fantastic. We've got great people. I see Roisin is still on the phone and our camera is working. Roisin, give us a thumbs up. Fantastic. Yeah, great stuff.
Okay, so look, what I'll do, if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to, Eamon is due to opt out, so you can remain there, Bridie. Richie is the first speaker. So, Eamon, if I could ask you, and it's not often I'd ask you to step out, as a fellow would say, but as long as you can come back to us there at 11:10 or 11:09, that's Bridie then gets the
perfect.
She gets her piece, and is that okay with you, Eamon? Yeah,
that's perfect. Go for my cup of coffee.
So you go enjoy the coffee, and if you can just completely log out and break your link,
so
and then Richie.
It was all working when I left, okay?
It'll be working when you come back. I feel like I'm in New York at the moment. Look at that. Oh, thank you. He's really good. Super. Yeah, super graphic. Yeah. Oh, I didn't get much sleep the last 2 nights, so...
You're up watching the election, Bridie?
I've been going on, yeah. We've all been watching it. Yeah, so look, big changes ahead for everybody, no matter what happens. So we'll mind our P's and Q's. That's we're live. So yeah, so we're here for another few minutes, just chit-chatting. So just to reiterate, in case some other people have joined, and I'm not sure where they can actually see us just yet, but if you can, welcome. We're just having a chit-chat in the background until we go live at 11 a.m. So Phil, we're getting some great feedback and expecting another good attendance this morning.
Yeah, I've had a number of people reached out to me, Bridie, and to be fair to them, they found some of the detail last week to be brilliant. There are obviously loads of ideas for people, and I suppose the question is, how do we even try and help people after this webinar series to capture all their thoughts, get it into a framework. But I'm even, today will be great insights from Eamon from an FMCG retail standpoint, as well as an operations expertise. But I'd also certainly say that next week we've got a segment on innovation from Paul Ward with Eamon. We've Lorraine Heskin coming from Gourmet Food Parlour, just telling us her story, with COVID, etc. Because she's a tremendous leader, and she's proving to be tenacious and very thoughtful going through this current pandemic. And then the culmination is that we are very fortunate to have the Vice Admiral Mark Mellett next week with us as well, who is going to try and share his knowledge and wisdom, as he does so well and eloquently. So I think, to be fair, I always enjoy listening to Mark because he's a rock and he's very sound in his advice. So I'm looking for him to share with us how he leads and share some of his nuggets as well. So I think that'll be great. So I'm looking forward to today, and I'm looking forward to next week. So. Yeah. And hopefully people will get a benefit. I think there's a lot of hard-working smaller businesses, startups. There's some medium-sized enterprises which I'm dealing with myself on a daily or weekly basis, and it's just to refresh the thought process for some of those people as well, because I know it's busy and it's very challenging in the current climate. So I suppose that's really our purpose,
Yeah. And, what are we trying to do with this series that we're offering out to our, agri-food, food sector, particularly focusing on SMEs? We can see Roisin is still working live before she comes on. We're all...
Hi, guys. Sorry about that.
No problem at all, Roisin.
You can hear me okay?
We certainly can. And we believe we're live. There's Richie. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning. So we're just having a chit chat in the background as we believe we are live, although we can't see our audience. And Sorka's manning the technological powers in the background. But just having a quick chit chat about how important the series is, and how grateful we are to you folks for giving your time and your energy to give this time, so that we can try and help and reach out and help those SMEs who are struggling, or maybe, as Phil has just said, maybe need a refresher, a reminder about what they can do, the things that they can do. And that, from the perspective of Taste for Success, we're here to help. We're here to try and link individuals with the experts that can work with them on a one-to-one basis, or where maybe we can get a group together to network that, and to be a support in the background, helping people to a very, very difficult time. And just so you know, guys, if you've got your microphones on, we can hear you moving around and shuffling around. So just beware. Oh dear, spill the teapot all over the place like I've done once before. But yes, I suppose this is what we're trying to say, is that, our role in Taste for Success is we have around about 500 member companies who we support through funding for upskilling and training, particularly in the food science and innovation, but also in the everyday business things that they need help in. And part of this webinar series that we're running with Phil at the helm, thank goodness, driving and engaging with all of you, is that we're trying to reach out as far and as wide as we can get to. And one of the things that technology and COVID-19 has enabled, surprisingly, is that we're now online. So it doesn't matter where we are, it doesn't matter where you are, if it's with some of our members, our fishermen out on Arranmore Island, in Sherkin, Castletownbere, out on Inishboffin, or in the Midlands where I am, in the deep Midlands. My nearest shop is 11 kilometres away. That's my local shop. We're surrounded, you know, sort of in a very rural part of Ireland. We can connect and we can help. And we can, you know, try and innovate and use that word pivot as much as we can to reach people and to get help to them, to, as Phil said, to be able to respond and to keep their businesses going and to keep their employees employed if they can, or as many of those as we can help. So whilst initially our whole focus tended to be very much on the training, the learning, the upskilling element, the networking model, the connecting, the support, the help, and linking our member companies, our member organisations to experts and those that can help and guide them is now becoming a very important part of what we can offer as a network. I don't know if Phil has any thoughts, or any of you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right, Bridie. It's just how we keep the momentum going. And I think, to be fair, Roisin, I know yourself, you've been involved with a series in the Bank of Ireland, which has been very successful. And I have to admit, I've enjoyed tuning into those sessions myself, and that some of the stats from the team in the bank, some of your colleagues, as well as the Board BA team, and other contributors have been really insightful. And I think that's a big part of what I suppose we're trying to do, is just share some of the knowledge. I know last week, Roisin, you put up some great slides, which certainly were very insightful. I could relate to a couple of them, I have to admit, in terms of Google searches and the COVID few pounds that went down and all that good stuff. But I certainly, I think it's great that we're sharing information, what's going on, and it's to point or try and guide people towards where the opportunities are with their businesses. So I think that's, and we're very fortunate. We've got a great lineup this morning, you know, between Richard Healy from Rex Consulting in terms of finance. We've Paul Ward, Head of Innovation Manager in EIM, and we've Eamon Howell, who's due to join us. I know Eamon is flat out at the moment, so it's great to have Eamon there joining us. So Eamon's due to join us just after 11. So it's I'm looking forward to all that exciting. And next week, of course, we've got a jam-packed webinar with Paul Ward and Eamon taking us through some innovation. We've got Lorraine Heskin from Gourmet Food Parlour, who's going to share her journey through the pandemic as a leader. But I've also seen her being very caring, both on social media platforms and minding people as well, which I think is a great sign in this current time, you know. So, and then of course we've Mark Mellett, Vice Admiral, who will be sharing his great knowledge of leadership and the styles and the approaches, etc. So it'll be all very interesting next week as well. So we're just coming up to 11 o'clock. So I would suspect we'll be launching quite soon. So I suppose we'll wait a couple of minutes, I think, Bridie, for people to come into the room.
Okay.
And I think at that stage, we can
presentation.
So I think once we get to that stage, we'll just give a few minutes, because I have a couple of polls which I've been discussing with Sorcha, and the aim is that we will launch those couple of polls. So ultimately, our aim this morning, we're part of the Facing the Future webinar series, so everybody's very welcome. We're on 11 o'clock. We'll wait a few minutes just to allow people to join and to give them time to get themselves started at home. We obviously can't see them, but we can certainly take people's chat or questions through the chatter medium on the side. So if you feel you want to put up your question, you're more than welcome to do so. And if there's any questions that you want to put in a private message, please do that, and we can follow up with people as well. So everybody's very, very welcome this morning. So just as we have a couple of polls launching. and the aim take us through those polls. Should I say, we'll go through those polls just as we're waiting for the presentation. So, Bridie, would you like to kick off our session with a brief intro? Because I know you're pressed for time this morning.
No problem. Thank you, Phil. First of all, good morning and welcome everybody. I'm Bridie Corrigan-Matthews from the Taste for Success SkillNet, and our Facing the Future series is about helping RSME members in the food and drink sector, right across from agri, food, beverage and seafood, to rapidly access and quickly respond to our current tumultuous environment. With the impact of COVID-19 on Ireland's food sector, now more than ever, it's about safeguarding future sales and planning for change. Our webinar today focuses on how to understand retail buyers and consumers. The panel comprises Senior Business Consultant Phil O'Sullivan, food industry experts Eamon Howell and Richard Healy, Paul Ward, Innovation Lead from Bord Sciawara, and Roshan O'Shea, Head of Food and Drink Sector at Bank of Ireland, who are ready to give you actionable, realistic tips and guidance on how to push forward. We're very grateful to have you all here. I hope that you get some great insights and advice from today, and we look forward to seeing you again in our final in this series next Thursday, the 12th of November at 11 a.m. So I'm going to pass over to Phil, and I'm going to do a rapid exit left, and I hope that you all enjoy today's presentation, and I will see you again on next Thursday. So over to you, Phil. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you're busy. So just before we kick off, we're just waiting 1 or 2 minutes. We're just allowing another minute or so just for people to join us. We have a poll running at the moment, which is how much time does your business spend business planning each year? And what's really interesting at the moment is just that there is a large amount of people who are spending more than 4 days, which is great. But we also have around 45% of the less than a day. So it certainly shows that there's room there that we can help people, guide them towards what are the better business planning tools. So I think that's great insight. We also have a group of people who don't business plan, I should say, because they don't necessarily know what are the steps involved. So that shows there is an opportunity. Can I just remind those people that last week we ran a webinar, and there are tools available to download for info@tasteforsuccess.ie, and you're more than welcome to get access to those business tools because they'll certainly help you for business planning or better business planning. So that's info@tasteforsuccess.ie. So I think that allows us to tee up, and our first speaker this morning is Richard Healy. Richard, you're very welcome. How are you?
And how are you, Philip?
I'm very, very good, thanks. So you're going to take us through the pitfalls of startups, so I'm not going to hold you back. I know you're anxious to get going, so thanks for joining us, Richard. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. So where I'm coming from, I suppose this is really some guidance that I picked up over my years of experience working in both food and other industries, observations I picked up from companies, and I suppose I really encourage you to consider things that I've come across in my working life. Why is cash top? Cash is important because without cash we can't run the business. We need to understand how we can manage that better. And assuming where you're at, do you think you know everything before you even start? If you do, then you're going to fall over a cliff. So my advice is crawl, take baby steps, and then walk before you really start running. Don't be shy about asking for help. In 2020 in particular, a lot of people have reached out for help because they're struggling for different reasons. Don't be afraid to look for it, and don't be deaf to it when it does come. Some might not be of benefit to you, but be selective in terms of what you hear. I think a critical part when you're starting up is understand business planning, and it's very basic at a startup level. What's your proposition? What are you bringing to the marketplace? Why are you bringing it? Who's your customer? Is the consumer looking for it? How did you find out the consumer is looking for it? What's the price involved? In terms of trial runs, you need to test your proposition. Whatever you're bringing to the market, if you don't test and it just arrives to a retailer, they won't know what you're selling. So you've got to involve them from the very start as well. And I think critical to it is the marketplace knowledge, capturing data as you go along, understand what your competitors are doing, what are your buyers' details, get some information on where you want to end up. Do you want to end up in small corner shops? Do you want to end up in the large multiples? But again, these are very much guidance suggestions for you, and items that you should consider when you are setting up day one. If we just go to the next slide, please. This is really picking up some of what Eamon covered last week in the webinar. I think it's if you want to get more detail on this, go back to last week's session. But again, it's about identifying who's your target consumer. Understand what they require. Is it somebody the same age as my daughter who's 24? Is it a grandparent? Is it a parent? What volume are you looking at? You need to understand the size of the opportunity you have. But if you don't know the numbers you're aiming for, then you won't know where to start from. And critical, and I think when I started out in business many years ago, websites were something you saw during the wintertime when the spiders came out, and on a frosty morning you saw them on the mirror of your car. Now websites are just so critical for a business. You need to make sure that you access these. So things like Board Beta, Enterprise Ireland, Local Enterprise Board, they help both at the start when you're researching stuff, but more importantly on an ongoing basis. And people need to remember that as they scale up their business. Just go to the next slide, please. But when I looked at this, it's difficult when you talk about finance stuff. How do I make it seem interesting? And it is a challenge, to be perfectly honest. Even though I've been a finance professional for 40 years, it is difficult to make it seem interesting. So if we step back a bit and forget about the information that's here on this slide, think of your favorite sports person. Think of athletes. Think of people in business. Think of people in various sports, say like rugby, GAA, series level athletes, and so on. The one thing that they're looking at now compared with 20 years ago is the need for data. And one of the things you see on each, what I would call professional or semi-professional sports person at the moment is on the back of their jerseys, you see a little box. And that gathers data about everybody during their training, during their playing of a game, and so on. So it helps them to understand what they did and didn't succeed in doing. It also measures things like heart rate and so on. It measures, I suppose, a lot of activity, how far they ran in a particular event. And what's it useful for? It helps the coaches subsequently to give them feedback on their performance, and it helps them to prepare better for the next outing. So if they're doing that on a sporting field, then I think it's important that we take that on board and apply it to a business field. So if we don't have knowledge, the chance of failure are very significant. What's your starting point? I think your starting point is understand your customers in the previous slide, looking at your volumes, see what kind of business you want to set up, and then put together your finance plan. The next slide will talk about banking, but we'll get that in a minute. In terms of your finance plan, it's crucial that you, at most, go out 5 years. There's talk now that people should look at a 3-year window. Sense check your data, get somebody else to look at it and review it with you and critically analyze it with you. And then once your business starts up, whether you like it or not, you need to compare, analyze, and understand every month with what you had planned. You learn from the data, and if appropriate, every quarter you reforecast it to build on the information you've had for that particular quarter. I can't stress enough the importance of having some form of basic finance package in place, because without a finance package, you're working on Excel spreadsheets, and they're fine in the first, as you build up to starting a business, but in the longer term, they will not help you, and they will only drive you to fail faster. Clerical support is critical. You might even find that you need somebody just to be sitting in the office to take calls or whatever. But if possible, that person should have some level of accounting background, because they can then double up rather than having to hire 2 people at the same time. Critical to your business is you need to understand your purchasing power. You need to understand who you're buying from. You need to have a variety of suppliers. You need to also be aware of what's your sales performance. and all that needs to be available somehow, and if possible, put it on some form of metrics, on some form of website metrics, but preferably you need to have some form of metrics there. Otherwise, if you don't have metrics, you won't know whether you're succeeding or not. I think some outsourcing is useful initially in the startup scenario. One piece of advice I've given is just not me saying it because I'm an accountant. I think you do need a good business accountant, and you need a good business advisor as much as being a business accountant. In the food sector, you need somebody who has experience in compliance. You need somebody who has experience in quality. You may not be able to afford to have them full time. So again, you need to look and see what do you require, and then look at the cost the same. Look at what you can afford, and go back to the previous slide around cash. What can you afford to have? But I think it's a bit like a question I asked myself many years ago: what can I afford to do? Or what can I afford not to do? And I think what can I afford not to do is probably more critical. Our good friend from Cork, Mr. Keane, if we just go back to the previous one, please, again. His famous mantra was, if we fail to prepare, then prepare to fail. And that is really my message this morning in terms of slide 1 and 3 around what are the failure prospects and also what type of monthly financial data do we require. Just take a look at the last slide that I have for today. So moving on, I think we talk about relationship with your bank. It is very important upfront, and Roisin spoke about this last week. You need to be open and transparent with your bank and your finance provider. You will hit speed bumps. Some of them may be very positive speed bumps. Some of them may not be good speed bumps. But if you don't let them know where your business is at, they won't be able to help you. Roisin can probably support this, but I think a bank will need to see your past experience in terms of delivering projects. The bank will definitely require to see what your financial projections are. They will check their robustness. They will check to see are they fitting with provable marketplace analysis. I think a critical thing to look at when you're looking for a relationship with a bank is, does your bank have a business advisor in the area that you're setting up your business in? So do they have somebody in the food sector? Do they have somebody in the building sector? Do they have somebody who has experience of your particular business? And if they do, then that's a great asset to use. And while the bank is providing you with finance, hopefully, they also want to succeed because they want to make money out of you. They want to make sure that capital is repaid, but they also want to be able to see, can they help you? I think one of the things that is critical to understand as well at the start is there will be a monthly repayment schedule with your bank. If all things being equal, that needs to be repaid. That needs to be done every month. So they're on side with you, and they will continue to support you. And also, Roisin, you can confirm this. I would presume that in the initial stages of a business that's starting up, that the bank will require possibly monthly, at worst quarterly accounts, and hopefully will help them to build a relationship with you as you continue to be, in particular, back to the top left side, you need to be consistently open and transparent with them, and take them through as much. You give them more detail possibly in the bad times than you do in the good times, because without knowing where your speed bumps are, they can never be there to help you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Richie. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people maybe are a little bit afraid of sharing the information with the bank, but actually what I've learned really is that the more transparent and the more consistent and the more you can tell your story, you can bring them on board. And there may be solutions that you may not have thought of that your local business advisor can help. I suppose part of my role just as a head of food and drink is actually to train up all the local business advisors on food and drink issues so they're aware and that they can give you the best advice possible. But I might ask you one question, because I think it's something I've seen with a lot of startups. What would you say is the most important thing in terms of having a relationship with your accountant and your business advisor, or your accountant and your financial advisor? What's the secret of success of maintaining a good relationship there?
I think it's probably maybe 2 or 3 points there. One is you need to trust your business advisor, and your business advisor needs to trust you. You need to also set out at the very start what you require from your business advisor and how often you require it. And if it's almost like setting up a KPI for your business advisor. So if you expect them to deliver monthly accounts on the second working day of each month, they have to be done. They're critical. And I think you should also be looking to use your business advisor to assist in relationships with with yourselves in the bank. I think look as well and use them when it comes to setting up credit terms. I think credit terms are something that initially a new business does not think about. Typically, when you have a supplier, your supplier will look to get to give you a shorter period of credit as possible. But when you go to provide your end product to the large multis, they will look to have a longer credit term than you're getting from your supplier. So overall, you have a cash issue. So they need to be involved, I think, initially in the nitty-gritty to make sure you get over your first 3 to 6 months leading up to going live, and then your 3 to 6 months of actual being live. Be involved as closely as they can then, because that gives them a feel for the business as well. They can help you. They'll have come across the experiences you're having in other industry, you hope. And I think a lot of it is, again, like I say, in dealing with yourselves in the bank, be open and transparent. If your advisor if you're feeding your advisor rubbish, you get rubbish back. And your advisor will eventually say, not interested anymore. You're not being open with me. I can't help you. And my name, I think what you've got to realize as a business is you're also your advisor is you're using their reputation in terms of information you're providing to third parties. They don't want their reputation sullied either. So if you're being mean with the truth and openness, they're going to struggle, and they will not be able to help you long term, and they will walk away. So again, I think it's the same as the relationship with the bank, top left and corners, and there will be bumps, my word.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richie. Brilliant. I was actually had a few questions for him, so really appreciate the guidance that you're offering there. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Our next presenter is Paul Ward, who's Innovation Manager with BIM. And Paul is going to take us through the development of customer personas. So I know Paul is a huge support to the BIM industry, and so I know we're in safe hands, Paul. No pressure, isn't that right? So I hope it's all well, and without further ado, I'll leave it with you. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. So we'll just go back to the previous slides, if you don't mind. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just describe 2 tools that, from my own experience working with a number of seafood clients, have proven to be very powerful. And I think they'll support your business in understanding and engaging with your customer. The first tool, next slide please, is what's called the persona. So a persona is a generalized version of your potential customers. When I say generalized, you're trying to get as much information. You're never going to have it all. Some of it will be qualitative data, some of it quantitative data, and others will just be pieces of information that you're going to get through research. And they help you to understand your customers' motivations, but also their frustrations. So what exactly is a persona? Next slide, please. So a persona is quite simply a map in terms of understanding the personality of somebody that you're going to engage with within your business. This doesn't have to be your customer. I mean, it can be your bank, as Richie was saying. It could be with your financial advisor. You're trying to better understand their personal drivers so that you can have a better working relationship. And it's worked on a number of areas. So it's the thinking field. So what does, this customer, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What really matters to them? What have you heard about them? What are maybe your competition saying about a particular customer? What is it said about them in general family business or written press? Also, what do you see? That might be you see them being very prominent in social media. you might see that they're leading out in some community areas. You might see they've got a high presence in the marketplace. So you're just trying to capture that and what do they say and do. And critical is their pain. So they are going to have in their business as a person, they're going to have fears and motivations. So understanding those and also understanding the gains, what they want and their measures of success. So I've generated a fictitious persona. Next slide, please. And this is given her name, and also her name is Gráinne O'Dowd. She's a buyer with a food service company. So this is a one-pager to capture the persona of Gráinne. So you can see she's a young, dynamic working woman. You can see from her background, you can see there what she's thinking and feeling, what she's likely to say, does, and behaviors. But the key thing here is what's highlighted in green, because these are the key areas in terms of aligning your product offering with this customer. So her motivations is, you know, she wants to showcase her skills within her own company and she wants to be progressive in her careers. So she, you know, she's going to be very focused, and she's going to be very clear in her targets that she wants to achieve. So you've got to try and support her in that space. But equally, she's got pain points, and in this case, she's time poor. She needs to find new products, and all of those products have to meet certain food service standards. And she wants also that any product that she lists has got the necessary supports and services to generate the sales and support her in her business. So this is really a visualization, and a persona like this is best put together with a team within your own company, because the more input you get, the more realistic it becomes. So why do it? What's the benefit in such a persona? Firstly, it's something you can share with your own team within your company. So it gives this one-page shared understanding of a potential customer for your business. It also helps you in making decisions. So before you would engage with Gráinne in this case, you know, an example is you might need to be very clear about what are you going to do in terms of promotions? What are you going to support Gráinne with in that space? What can you afford to do in that space? So it's directing you to be clear about what decisions you're going to be clear with her on, and that just then enables her to make quick time decisions so that she's not waiting for you to go away and come back in, and it becomes a back and forth engagement process. It's also useful in terms of you wanting to understand your end consumer of your product. So you generate another persona, which is the end consumer. So why would an end consumer purchase your product? You know, what's their motivations for buying it? And what pain points do they have that your product offering is alleviating and addressing? So a persona like this is all about trying to align your product with a buyer, a customer, and the end user. This type of persona has been used, it's called design thinking. It's been quite widely used within the technology industry. So for instance, you know, Apple and your Android phones, car manufacturers would use this a lot because they want to understand the end consumer. What's their motivations to buy a particular product, and what is the pain points that they're trying to alleviate. So the second tool that I want to just go through is called Customer Journey Map. So next slide, please. So A customer journey map is visualization representation of the steps that your customer might take to accomplish a job that they're trying to get done. And the knowledge of this means that you're not actually trying to push a product, but you're trying to map your customer's process, and you're trying to map your engagement onto that. So I've done an example here as well. So if we just go to the next slide, please. So again, it's talking from Gráinne's perspective. So in the persona, we understood that she's a buyer, and in this case, she's trying to source new artisan food companies to get products listed. So we started up in the top left-hand corner. So it's the process that Gráinne is undertaking because she wants to get new products and in particular formats, but it's actually a journey for her to get that. So wherever you have those red emojis, that's a sort of a pain point for Gráinne. So how can you better alleviate some of those pains there? So, you know, we're talking about, she's to start off just, you know, by doing a Google search or searching a directory, and she's not sure what product offering is there. So visibility for your product offering at that very early stage where somebody's doing a search is important. And Richie's talked about, and we've talked about, you know, a lot of cases it may be done on web-based searches to get an understanding. Then there's going to be the, you know, taking products back and tasting them, and there's going to be a lot of market data. So having that presented and ready so that you're engaging in with Gráinne at that level, that she's not asking for, you're following up, but it's there as a brochure or as a portfolio of all the requirements that she needs to support her product getting listed. So the key thing here is that understanding your product offering and how that would actually fit into your customer's journey in terms of getting it listed is critical. And it's understanding, by understanding that, you get a better understanding of where you can gain an opportunity. So to wrap this up, I suppose there's been two customer or two focused tools, the persona and the customer journey map, that support you in understanding your customer and how you can engage with them. And it's looking at it from the customer's perspective as opposed to you're trying to push it. So it's about stepping into the shoes of your customer and your consumer. And once you kind of pull a portfolio of these together along your supply chain, it allows you to understand where you might have to adjust or innovate around your product offering to make it better fit into the marketplace. Thank you.
Paul, that was great. Can I just ask you, you've probably been through this with a lot of clients over the years. Are there any flashes of insights that have jumped out when you've been doing this, or is there any particular feedback from clients that resonates with you?
Yeah, so we've taken this through with a number of clients, largely going into export markets. So the first thing is, the first feedback we always get from our clients is that I never thought about that, I never considered that. So it gives them the opportunity to go away and do the research in that space. The other is, from that, we help them prepare for their engagement with a buyer. And it also highlights areas where they know that they're not in a position to address at this moment. But when they met with the buyer, in one instance, the buyer was acknowledged that they were upfront, to got straight to the point. So we can't, there's a technical issue there we can't deliver on right away. But the buyer, I suppose, appreciated that and said, well, look, we can actually come in with another product offering while they're working on the technical solution for that offering. So it's built that relationship and that's still ongoing today, and the product portfolio offering is growing there.
Brilliant. So, Paul, thanks a million. That is, I have to admit, to be fair, I've seen a lot of companies use the lean model. I've seen it doing the personal persona, and there's no denying it adds huge value. The positive part, even with our poll today, is that 75% of the companies that are online are saying to us that they have now developed personas. So that's a big step forward for a lot of people to understand who they're actually selling their product to. I know myself, during the week I spoke to a particular client. They got a huge benefit out of your presentation last week. So they thought it certainly moved the dial for them. So thanks a million for that. And I appreciate your contribution today. So we'll see you next week, hopefully, again. And thank you very much.
That's excellent to see there's so many people using personas to understand their customer. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers. Roisin, before we move on, we have a next slide here, which I actually wanted to talk to your good self about. Because I said, given your vast experience over the years of working with business models, I was mindful of what you thought yourself were the most important elements, or where you'd seen success come about. What were the key factors for a successful business model?
Yeah, look, I think all of the prep models that you showed, the pestle, the lean business, I love, because it's so quick in a way to do the persona development. You can do them quickly. It doesn't have to be a huge they're all lower no-go. And it basically said, we have 3 criteria and we will go if we have 2 of the 3, but we will not go otherwise. And their 3 criteria were, we have a strong route to market, we have a strong brand, or we have a strong product. So they figured that, say, even if it was a Me Too product, if they were launching it under a brand like a Tropicana or a PepsiCo or a Pepsi or maybe a Walker's, because their route to market was so strong, they could do it. And I think or if, and I think it equally applies to kind of someone in the startup phase. If you don't have a route to market, you need to make your brand and your product really, really sing. Or if conversely, your brand, you don't have the money to spend on the brand, but you have a really good product, well, then your route to market must be really strong, and you need to partner with someone to go and get your product out. So I think it's a useful and quick sense check. Do you have at least 2 out of the 3, and can you make those 2 stronger than they are? So I think that's quite an interesting one.
Brilliant. I know. I think you're so right there with the distribution, and that strength of having that connectivity to customer, consumer just allows you to get things going. As we're just heading into a really, really fantastic segment here with Eamon Howell, is there anything that you would have learned yourself? Because Eamon is the maestro in terms of this space. He's smiling there. He's ready in the wings. Is there anything that you would have learned yourself from dealing with the likes of buyers over the years, Roisin? Might be questioning Eamon in a while.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose, you can have your plans, but at the end of the day, they're your plans. And you have to kind of modify them when they get in contact with the real world outside your bubble, and you meet the retailer. And I suppose, look, preparation is key. You only get a certain amount of time with these guys, so you have to be brief, be bright, be gone. But what I would say is that some of the best information I got was actually before the meeting started over the years. So, you can have all your preparation done, but take the time to listen, have that conversation when you're going up the stairs to the meeting room. Try and gauge what's going on. Don't pull out your presentation first. Go and say, look what I have. Try and find out what what's going on in their world, and then that will really make a big difference to how you tailor it. And be prepared to think on your feet, because you may need to kind of vary your message as you go through based on what you learn in that first 5 minutes. So personally, for me, they were always the most valuable 5 minutes of the whole thing.
You're just giving away the secrets now to to Eamon now about how we normally went at those particular negotiations. But anyway, I say that in jest. I love that. Be brief, be bright, be gone. I think that's a great nugget just for people to not overstay their welcome. So no different to me right now. I'm going to hand it over to Eamon, if that's okay. And thank you, Roisin, for that. So Eamon, look, we'll leave it in your safe hands. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you're under pressure this morning, but you're very kind to join us. And we look back to hearing your presentation. So thanks a million.
Thanks, Phil, and good morning, everybody. You can hear me, Phil?
Yes, we can hear you, Eamon. Yep. Okay,
so we'll jump in. So we'll go on to the next slide there, please. So this is just a quick recap of what we covered in webinar 1. And you're hearing it again today, that it all starts with the consumer. So we covered a number of bases in terms of those macro demographics, the primary and secondary needs of the consumer, the way in which we segment consumers so that we can understand the bullseyes, the food trends that were relevant at the moment in terms of food and beverage, and also we discussed what was hot and what was not in terms of digging in a bit more granularly. So I don't plan to recover that, but it's just the anchor tenant in relation to going forward. So the point of relevance of showing that slide is just like you as sellers, if I use the word sellers, producers, etc., are obligated to look at those aspects of the consumer, so too are the buyers looking at the exact same collateral. So today I want to push it on a little bit and look at things through the eyes of the buyer. So walk in their shoes, so to speak. And we go again. Just like you, this is the key point, just like you, the buyers, you're busy in your offices, your facilities, your factories, your production units, etc., and you're looking at all that, those aspects. And the buyers they were in their offices and now they're in their homes and they're looking at the exact same playing pitch, the exact same set or suite of information to garner as much knowledge about the consumer as they can so that they have a very clear trajectory on going forward. And we go again, please. So, I mean, it's a little bit stereotypical to say the buyer and the seller on the opposite sides. I'd put it differently. You're both viewing the exact same set of challenges and the exact same opportunities. You just happen for one aspect to be on different sides of the conundrum, which is when it comes to a specific negotiation. But that is just such a small element of the overall relationship. So I put it to everyone on the call that there's a real need just to look at it's the buyer and the seller working together. And that's 90% of this agenda. And so the word joint is really key. And soon I'll come on to talk about joint business plans, because it's you're bringing your plan, the buyer is bringing their plan, and the beauty and the magic happens when it's stitched together. And there's the cliche of an element of win-win, and that you have the best opportunity to maximize the prize, to maximize the return. So if we go forward, please. So today I'm just looking at the other side of the same coin. So just to recap, we have for the last webinar and much of this webinar focused on the seller, you the seller, again, I don't want to stereotype, but just as an adage, please, that you're preparing a business plan. And what I want to introduce is the fact that the buyer is simultaneously preparing what is termed a category plan. And I'm admittedly today specifically talking about retail and the retail industry, but you can apply that to the food service business and to other industries beyond. And most of those industries were broken down into business units or categories, and hence why we use the term a category plan. Okay. We go again, please. So, category planning. I just want to introduce you to this. This diagram on the right-hand side is an 8-step category plan, which was common across most European retailers for quite some time now. It's a traditional approach. It has evolved in certain areas, but I find over my experience that this is one of the most simple ways of setting out. And so there's 8 steps in the plan. And I've chosen to just list it again on the left-hand side of the page and break out one of the steps, the strategy step, a little bit more, just so that people get an understanding. So quickly, it's about defining the category. So we're in the category of, let's just say, impulse soft drinks. But what are the elements to that category? It's not just impulse soft drinks. There's energy drinks, there's hydration, there's water, there's carbonates, etc., etc. So the buyer puts a construct on exactly what's there at the moment and what might emerge. If you go back, please. What's the role of the category? You might say that sounds a little bit complex. It's not really, which is, again, we're in impulse soft drinks. You might say is to give people a drink. No, it's about calories. It's about energy. It's about satiety value. It's about hydration, etc., etc. So that's how new emerging segments and products are evolving all the time. Once you understand the role of each subset within the category. There's a natural step then that the buyer looks at, which is assessment of the numbers. They're look at the size of the prize, no different to what you're doing. They're setting out their objectives for the category. So you have your objectives for a business plan, for your business. Equally, where am I going to take this category? Am I going to make it more appealing to kids? Am I going to try and reach out to a new set of adults? Am I going to make it more female orientated, etc.? So it depends on where the buyer is going to take the category based on they trying to win in their market. So if you're in a particular retailer, you're trying to beat the other retailers, can you gazump them by basically availing of a particular direction for the category and get there before the others do? Now, then that buyer is going to develop their strategies. What does that mean in reality? They have a range strategy. What way are they going to position and condition the range? What pricing scaffolding, what pricing levels are they going to choose? What type of promotions are they going to run, if at all, what and when? What level of quality are they going to pursue? Is it a good, better, best? Are they going to be premium? Are they going to be more entry level? What way is it going to merchandise in the stores? So, and that brings a whole host of retail operations. Is it going to be self-serve? Is it going to be served? Is it simply going to be put up on a planogram? And then obviously they have the whole strategy in terms of what level of cost and so on. There's a whole set of tactics to go behind that. They have an implementation plan and then they're going to review it, no different to we do in a lot of plans. So we'll go again, please. Now, here's the nub of the point. It's when they're doing their work on the range is the main door in, is the main entry point for most of us on the call. Now, there's a natural order of things in terms of the way in which a buyer establishes their range. They typically review the range every 12 to 18 months. So to understand what's the range calendar for the portfolios that you may be working in. And if so, if they're going to be doing launching their new range in June, the buyer is going to be working on that 20 weeks in advance. So you need to be talking to them in January in order to get a chance to get into that launch window. It's not that you're precluded from launching products in July, August, September. It's just more difficult. So thus far, what I've hoped I've given you a little basis of understanding for is there's such a thing as a category plan. It's a corollary of what you're doing in a business plan. The buyer is working on that, and a category plan will typically set out their stall for the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. And there's a whole load of inputs go into that. And then specifically within that category plan, there's a calendar for when they're doing their range. And if you understand that, that's your best opportunity to open the door, have those discussions, and gain access to the vehicle that's hurtling along that you want to be on. Go again, please. So what's the buyer looking for when they're determining that range? And this is, I suppose, marries a lot with what Paul set out with Grania, the example or the sample buyer. So we can use Grania as looking to meet the consumer's primary and secondary needs that we talked about at the last webinar and that I socialized at the start of this meeting. They want to differentiate their range. They do not want a Me Too. They want to stock emerging brands, be part of the real positive trajectory of things that are hot in terms of the market. They want to fill range gaps versus other retailers. So you can use that saying, I got it listed in this retailer, you don't have it, I think you should. You can use it as a point of leverage. They want to close value gaps. It's not all about differentiation. It's not all about premium. Sometimes you have to have some bargain basement products in order to fulfill those shopper needs and to make sure that you're not catering for that aspect of the market. They're always wanting to improve the profitability of the range, and this is where the tough negotiations come in relation to margin. New products, they will ask you to beat the average category margin. So if you're in soft drinks, and if the average category margin in impulse soft drinks is up around 50-60%, which it can be due to the nature of that category, they'll obligate and push you to beat the margin so that they're enhancing the average continually. And if you have an existing product, they will often challenge you to increase the margin by 1 to 2% every year. So how do you do that? How do you plan to do that? It's only one way. You either add value and differentiate and bring out new variants that can command a higher RSP so that there's more margin to share, or you have to reduce your costs repeatedly, and that's where you have to have a very solid business plan. And also they're willing to cut the range and want to cut the range as the new stuff comes in. The old stuff has to go out and gets jettisoned, and you do not want to be part of that. So if you have a product listed already, you have to work it hard to get your rate of sale up so that you don't, so that you hit the hurdle rates and you don't fall foul and find yourself in the tail. We'll go again, please. Now, here's a tip in relation to, it's just one little nugget, guys. 2 products. So I want to talk about rate of sale. What is rate of sale? Rate of sale is the number of units of a product that's sold in a given store, a given retail outlet, in a given day. Okay. So I've just given 2 examples here, product A and product B. They both happen to sell exactly the same amount in a week, 1,400 euros per week. They both happen to have the exact same RSP, €2. So you might be forgiven for saying they're pretty much the same, so aren't they? No, they're not, because one product, product A, in this example, is selling in 50 stores. The other product is selling in just 10. So, trust me, the maths, I hope we're right. The rate of sale of product A is 2. It's, apologies, that's a typo there. That sells 2 units per store per day. Product B is 10 units per store per day. That last line is an error. I'll correct that in the handouts. So the buyer will look to the potential in product B with the higher rate of sale over and above A. What's the key lesson here is don't just look at sales numbers, look at the units that are being sold and the rate at which they're selling in any given outlet, because that tells of the amount of oxygen, the amount of potential in a product, and that's one of the key measures that buyers will look at beyond the sales line. We go again, please. So, much of the discussion, you may be forgiven for kind of thinking of what we term the home category. That's just a term that we use at retail, which centers on I'm down the aisle, I'm in the soft drinks arena, there's a planogram in front of me, there's 3 bays of shelf space, and that's where I want to be listed. So that's what we call the home category. Now, there's so little space in stores, and they're so hungry for space, and there's so many products, thousands of products, that every inch of space is getting worked very hard. So there is an alternate to getting listed in the home category. And that is if you happen to avail of being listed in what we call incubator categories. And so a number of retailers, examples here, Food Academy for SuperValu, Tesco Taste Bud, Lidl Kickstart, Grow with Aldi, are all set out as a means to support local products, innovative brands, new emerging suppliers, and give them siphon off a little bit of space and not obligate them to meet the hurdle rates at the same pace as you might do with a bigger brand. And so they exist, and it's to have an understanding that it's another route, and your best avenue in there is to talk to your local enterprise office, because by and large, the local enterprise offices are very well tapped in to those opportunities across that retailer set. And then the LEO, the local enterprise office, will guide you from there. If we go again, please. So All that said, to engage your buyer, you must understand the consumer, consistent with what we've set out. We're all preaching that gospel. You must ensure your product has real brand clarity. What are you about? What's your product for, as they'd say? Your product must be trialed and tested, because that's what's going to give the buyer the confidence that, okay, this has been road tested, and the consumer, not you, won't trust you as much as they will solid facts from the consumer saying this consumer likes this. They're willing to buy it. They've tested it in one store and it sold 10 units on Monday. Do you know what? That could be 50 units in a week. I can see a trajectory and a plan being built off the back of that. You must be clear on your USP so that you can proposition the buyer, and be mindful of shortfalls. And whether you don't necessarily call them out overtly and shoot yourself in the foot, but you need to be addressing them as best you can. You must be clear on the consumer feedback. You must have a valid, viable manufacturing solution, the right quality assurance. What you don't want is go a month in and next thing you have a quality issue, that the taste is not right or there's something happening. The right distribution options, and Phil would have talked about that in the past. You must be clear on the numbers, specifically your end-to-end costings. So we covered that in the last webinar. What RS or retail price you're recommending, the cost of your production. We dealt with that in the last webinar. And what's the level of margin share that's up for grabs here? And then let the negotiations kick off on the back of that. And all of that is articulated in the business plan. So that's where I'm going to finish in terms of start of just one last slide, I think, which basically is the criticality of having a business plan to wrap all of what I've discussed in and put a very simple, viable proposition in front of the buyer who has the same agenda to propel their category plan, just like you have to propel your business plan. That's it. Back to Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Eamon. That's absolutely brilliant. The chat has livened up, and there's a number of questions that have come in both on the chat as well as one or two on email, and it's really good. First question, if you wouldn't mind, because I know Roisin has a few questions there as well, is a question from the chat was, does the buyer share the category plan? So there's a question.
They should. Straight answer, they should. Now, it's a valuable collateral. It's something that they would not want to be shared with competitive retailers.
Yes.
But if you, I'm sure we'll get into this. This is about relationships as much as numbers and business plans and all of this. This is about relationships, and you must have trust. So what I think is that in engaging buyers, you probably above everything else, you want to build trust and you want to build a relationship. You should and can ask them for their category plan. They don't have to hand over this document signed, sealed, and delivered, like Leo Ver. Yeah. Well, I would say that. They can talk to you about the salient points of the plan. And I just wrote down here in advance of the call in terms of, I set out 8 points in a category plan. Okay. But if you step back from it, what is it? It's very simple. You talk to a buyer about, look, what's your ambition for this category? What route are you traveling? What do you need? And where do you think I can fit in? And that's the kind of the type of asks. And also, it's not about all asking the buyer to tell me, please give me all the answers. You also have an opportunity and an obligation, I would say, to feed into the category plan. So with the big boys, the Mondelez's, the Kraft, the Walkers, etc., buyers will choose what we term a category partner. And that's the whole point, is they'll choose a category partner and they'll have loads of resources, etc., to say, I'm going to develop a category plan with you as a buyer. For most of the people on the call, we don't have that level of resources, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So the key point I would make is that, notwithstanding that you're not a category partner, notwithstanding that you don't have many, many thousands to put into loads of research to feed the buyer and influence them, you have insight. You have consumer feedback. You have information on your product, and you can start feeding that in as they're building their category plan to saying, I want this to be part of your consideration set.
Okay. Another question, and thank you for that, Eamon, is somebody, you mentioned the word oxygen there a while ago around the rate of sale.
Yeah.
And it's how do people get that type of detail? Do they end up having to pay for it? Is it something, they're just at how do we get the information? So.
Okay, so for I suppose 2 avenues. First of all, they can build this information themselves. So my experiences with SuperValu, so if you don't mind, I'll just use that particular example.
Sure.
And for many people on the call, they'll start out with not dealing with head office, but dealing with a local SuperValu store. So if I'm supplying to SuperValu Clonakilty, then I would be visiting that store. I would be talking to consumers in that store. I'd be asking the local store manager, how many products did we sell last week? Obviously, for my whole replenishment, I'm getting an understanding of what is the quantity that sold yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. So all of a sudden, I have total access to rate of sale in that store. It's when it starts to get a bit bigger and maybe you're on central distribution or whatever, and the information is going into head office, and next thing you're selling, and next you realize, okay, I don't have all the transparency that I used to have when I was more of a local supplier. And then back to the relationship, which is some buyers will try to trade every single bit of information they give you. Yeah, I'll give you the information, but I want money for it, and so on and so forth. Again, I would say relationships here is that most buyers will give fledgling companies and growing companies the bounce of the ball and say, look, I'll give you the information that you want. If you establish the relationship, ask them appropriately and choose your timing. I think timing is really important in all of this.
Yeah.
That you don't just kind of go in and grab in terms of information, but I would say, in short, to get that information, get local yourself and build a relationship where you're able to ask the buyer.
Okay. I know Roisin has a couple of questions to ask. One question before I hand over to Roisin is that what type of margin do you think the buyers are expecting? So there's a kind of a low ball now, Eamon, so that's all right. It's how long is a piece of string? So let me have a go at answering it. There was probably a cliche of old that was kind of a third of the margin would go into the retail sector. It's actually more than that. My view is that the retail sector would operate to a margin on average, and this would include franchisees, to all added up. So the end-to-end gross margin would be pushing up on average up to about 40%. Okay? Okay.
Now, that's an average. And that's for retail. And in the food service sector, you'd be up more in the 60 to 80 bracket. So we'll pick the central point there of 70 in the food service sector. Why? Because there's a whole load of costs, because you have to pay for all the people that are going around serving that product and the waste and all that go off of that. So please don't default to the fact that that is unnecessarily high. When you whittle down all the costs, the electricity, the open the doors, the staff, the labor, the waste, etc., you're getting back down to more sustainable, what I will term EBITDAs, where it's fully loaded, margin and cost, and they're typically, competition will dictate that they're appropriate at the end of the day. Chill margin, so if I go back to my average in retail, if the average is about 35-40, chill will typically be anything up to, I would say, averaging 10% higher than that. And then when you get into the portfolios, there is a huge variance. So for example, and just step back and think about this. I'll mention a few portfolios. The baby category and alcohol. Some say the two go together. There's very low margin in those categories. Why? Every time you turn sideways, there's an alcohol promotion. Every time you turn sideways, there's a baby bog off. So they're used as footfall categories to entice people into the store, and they're sold for little or no margin. Produce is an area that has been more handsome of old, less now, because the amount of price cuts with the arrival of the discounters, it's been massively deflated by tens of percents over the course of the last decade. You go to the other end of the spectrum, and coffee, very buoyant at the moment, high RSPs. You're into 70-80% margin in there. So you have a product that's, the higher the promotional participation, the more prone it is to price cuts, the more own brand. So if you stand in front of a portfolio and you find that, Christ, there's 40% of this is branded and 60% is own brand, I can guarantee you that the margin in that portfolio is going to be relatively low, because it's just a slugfest.
Yes, I have you. And that's
your average is 40, and you're going from 0 to 100.
And it's a mixed basket depending on the categories.
The advice is not to get too caught up in the figure, but to understand the drivers of the margin, and then you'll get a bit closer to the truth.
And I think that's brilliant. Roisin, I know you're dying to get in there, so I'm going to hand over to you.
You're very good. I suppose one other observation I'd make, I know we've talked a lot about the buyer, but I think there's some really other important people in the mix too. The buyer's assistant is incredibly important. If you look after them and you're good to them on the phone and decent, to deal with, I think that is a huge help. And I think the other one is the supply chain guys can often give you some really valuable information as well. So I wouldn't necessarily be thinking that, there's only one point of information to get. There are other ways to get it. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I suppose, Eamon, I suppose one of the things that's kind of changing a lot is things like technology. Do you think how can that benefit suppliers in terms of, I suppose, building a proposition?
The three aspects of technology that jump front of mind with myself, Roisin, would be online, digital marketing, and thirdly, a point that was mentioned earlier in the webinar, with data. And if I deal with the last one first, data and customer relationship management, i.e. accessing your consumer, getting so close to them that they're willing to share some of their details with you, and then you're able to establish data on the back of that. For me, that's a territory that's typically very sophisticated, comes with a lot of cost, can be very resource hungry. And so for me personally, I would say that that's important over time, but it's not the most urgent thing in relation to technology that I'd be encouraging people to get into. Contrary to that, we're all witnessing at the moment the growth of online. The online market for food was about 4%. It's growing significantly. I was part of a European group there on calls recently, and I believe in Holland, in COVID, it jumped up to about 17%. And we're hearing from China now that it's up in late 20s. So the online food market is going to grow very quickly. And no matter where you're situated, how are you going to respond to that? And if you're not building online platforms and all this, because it's not part of you're feeding into them in some way. The second point for me is digital marketing. The rate at which things have moved away from traditional media into simple digital marketing on Facebook, etc., has been remarkable. And I think it's a very cheap source of getting your product, your brand, your story out there. And I couldn't encourage people enough to get, and if you don't understand it yourself, there's an awful lot of people who will give you, we'll talk about a couple of hours a week, and just they're educated, they're habituated in this whole area, and they can really help out companies in that regard. So digital marketing, I would really recommend. And a good example of that is the Frank and Honest brand, which some of you maybe have drank. That does nothing but digital marketing. It has never been on traditional media because it's not part of its positioning.
Look, it's a fantastic example, yeah, and it's doing so well. Eamon, I suppose the other one is just say when things go wrong, should we say? So when there's an impasse, have you any advice?
It's a great question, Roisin, and coincidentally, I was asked this exact question by a small distributor of a brand 2 weeks ago, and he has come to an impasse with a very large customer, and it's very, very difficult. So my advice, having thought about it then and now, is first of all, I can't emphasize enough to once we go into this space, because it's so difficult, anything you can do in advance not to get into this space, I just want to re-emphasize this. Build a relationship with the buyer. Not all buyers are easy to do that. Some are standoffish, some of them are particularly hard, etc., etc. But try to build the relationship. Read the signals. If you find that is going wrong, try and arrest it midway, because when you get into the impasse territory, you're typically talking about some degree of loss. What I would say is the next phase in the story for me is that I think you have to give ground. I think there is an element that you're going to have to forfeit a battle with the hope that you will lose a war. And I don't say that easily, but I am in the zone of responding to the question, which is if you've reached an impasse. So you have an intransigent buyer who basically says, I want you out, I'm not going to return your calls, etc., etc., and you're there and your whole livelihood is dependent on this. You must begin to build your opportunity elsewhere. You must have more eggs in more baskets so that you're not a hostage to this particular situation. I would say, finally, the nuclear button is, do you escalate? And I'm slow to advise anyone to escalate, because I think you could go to their boss and you could say, look, having a tough time, not getting a fair bounce of the ball. I'm being treated harshly. I'm being treated unfairly. And I think that in response to that, even if the boss is very fair-minded and says, do you know what, fair call, and I'm going to open a bit of a door to you here. I think if the situation if the relationship had been that poor with the buyer, I think you might end up paying for it in the long run. I hope you don't, obviously, but I think human nature is that the 1%, I don't think there's a whole load to be gained, and I think that you're in a very dark territory if it has gone that bad. So I would say it's all about not allowing it to get there. And I would say sometimes you do have to cut off a small toe, but you're still walking. And I think reach out to the buyer and just have that one-to-one to basically say, this is where I'm coming from. So try and draw a line and basically, this is where I'm coming from. And look, I'm willing to give this, this, and this. I'm willing to concede on these areas, but I do need to be viable and sustainable. It isn't, if you push me this far, I'm over the edge. That's all you can do.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Eamon, thanks a million for the answering those ones. I know some of those are tough. There's sticky questions, but you know what? I have no doubt people on the call this morning will have got a huge insight. And I think you're coming at it from a very, having been in those negotiations myself. It's a tough space, but I do think you're talking with a practical mindset. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation this morning. Roisin, thank you for being with us. Richard, thanks very much for being here as well. Great presentation. And Paul is there in the background. I just want to thank him for his presentation. Our webinar next week is on innovation and leadership. And I know Eamon, yourself and Paul are going to be coming together. We've Lorraine Heskin from Gourmet Food Parlour talking to us about her own journey in her business. And through the pandemic, what she's had to do, etc. And I know she's also been excellent in terms of reaching out to others who've been going through a challenging time. So I know she's demonstrating all the right qualities. Fair play to her. And then our culmination session is with the Vice Admiral Mark Mellett, where Mark will talk to us about leadership, what people should be looking out for in companies, how to grow certain talent, philosophies as the leader of the Defence Forces. So I'm really looking forward to next week's webinar, everybody. And thank you very much for last week. Thanks for this week. It's been a pleasure, and just wish you the best for the day. And we'll see you again soon. All right. And thanks to Taste for Success Skillnet as well. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.